from that and grow from that, but he still wants that communion and communion with us, just like with the spouse. You know, if me or you didn't talk to our wife but once a week, I can guarantee you it's not going to be long that you know, think there's going to start being a separation there. So, but we do that to God all the time.
All the time.
And I heard a preacher say this. He said, you know, when was the last time that as a believer, that for just no reason, I just looked up and said, God, I love you.
Yeah.
Holy Spirit, I love you for indwelling me.
I'll tell you when I do that most. I know this sounds crazy, but when I lay down in that bed at night and I kick back and that bed feels so good after a hard day's work, you know, I think,
how lucky I am. How lucky I am. Right. Well, and
that may be crazy, but that's how I feel sometimes.
But that's what God wants. And I think that's another one of those things that you know, salvation and being a believer or being a Christian is so misrepresented. Because I can assure you that, from that place of just learning that God's not just this far away, great big being that's just standing there waiting on you to mess up so he can just strike you down.
Yeah.
But he's actually looking for a relationship, not to encourage that shortcoming, but to let you know that when everything around you falls apart, man, we've got a place to hide right there. I mean, we've got something that we can go to, and he's wanting that mindset in us to run directly to him and lean on that rock that's a solid foundation.
Right.
And in that spot, man, you find that life don't have as much ability to toss us around as it does outside of that place. Yeah. So, I'm with you. I mean, you know, it may seem kind of foolish outside the wall of a believer, but a true believer will understand this. I like to make it a point every once in a while just to, you know, Jesus, thank you. I love you, not because of me, but because you showed me what love was when you hung on that cross. Yeah. God, I love you because you love me so much, you was willing to give the best you had. So please help me to give the best I've got.
You know, and part of that is understanding how depraved we really are in our natural state. You see, that's something that as a non-believer you don't really get. You don't understand.
Right.
Is how depraved the human condition really is. I mean, we always want to look at other people as, you know, I'm not that serial killer down the road. I'm not that guy. You know, at least I'm better than that. Right. And we all do that. Even as Christians, we say, well, you know, I'm not bad as that guy. Look what he did.
Right. And we're all one bad decision away from that.
Yeah. But the thing about it is, when we totally recognize how needful and how depraved we really are without God, that's when we start seeing that need for something greater than us and going, wow, you know.
Right. That's when you start to understand maybe I do need to run to him rather than run from him.
Right.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's many things that, you know, we talked about it. You know, sin is one thing that'll it just by nature, you want to run from God. And then there's distractions in life.
Right.
And all these things that, and I don't think it's a coincidence that we have all these distractions
Absolutely
in life. We've got all these devices sitting around that's intended to take our focus away from God and onto the things of the world. And, you know, that creates a separation between God and the believer. But I find the biggest separation is when sin comes into your life. If you allow sin to come in, and I mean, at least it's been that way in my life. If I allow a little bit of sin or something come into my life that I shouldn't, and boy, that just wrecks. It wrecks your relationship with God, and you've got to get that right. You've got to run back to God and get that right, or you'll be miserable.
I will. Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you something that I had a conversation with an individual one time, and kind of where you was going sort of brought that back to my mind. And this goes to show just how easy it is for the adversary or lie to change the way that God intended us to think. And I was talking to this individual, and they were talking about a shortcoming.
Yeah.
And talking about sitting in church, and they said, you know, I sit right there in that church, you know, for weeks, and I watched everybody around me rejoicing, and I just sit there just like a whooped pup. Yeah. Well, in my mind, I had to think about that. And the first thing I thought was, well, the Bible said that if we will confess, that he's faithful and just to forgive. So in that moment, I understood and realized it's the devil that puts that in our mind and causes us to draw back, because he knows that separation just will continue to grow and grow and grow. Mm-hmm. So I asked the question, I said, well, let me ask you. I said, was you in that spot because God didn't forgive you, or because you couldn't forgive yourself?
Right, there it is. There's that conscience.
And that's that conscience.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Paul talks about that so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Having that good conscience.
Having that good conscience toward God.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and that's, again, you know, it's not a coincidence that our mind is trained mm-hmm. to draw back, because right. that's exactly what happened in mm-hmm. the beginning. But God wants us to run to him mm-hmm. and fix this, clear that
It's
conscience.
about our perception. And, you know, when Paul talks about the meats offered unto, you know, sacrificed
right.
unto idols.
Right.
And he talks about how meat in itself, there's nothing wrong with meat. Those of us who have knowledge, we know that it's just meat. But if your conscience is defiled because of this, right. because you have a weaker conscience, you know,
then.
But we're talking about the same thing. It's right. the same subject. But one's conscience can be defiled and the other not.
Right.
And so what we see there, it's all about our perception.
It's all about
our perception.
Right.
I remember years ago, there was this home interior picture. I know everybody knows home interior that right. grew up in the 70s.
Yeah, especially at our age. Yes.
Yeah, boy. And so home interior was so big. Well, there was this painting. It was a beautiful painting that almost everybody had this in their house. And it was a painting of two kids going across this bridge. And there was a board broken on the bridge, and there was troubled waters underneath. And there's this guardian angel over top that's looking down over those kids. And it's just a beautiful picture. Right. But later on, it was understood, after millions of people had this in their house, that a devil worshiper had actually painted this picture. And if you got to looking at this picture really close, you'd see in that angel's hair a snake. You'd see skulls in the water, and you'd see a basket with a rat coming out of
right.
it. And so when that come out and everybody started seeing that, they're like, oh my gosh, get this out of my house. Yeah. But until they had that conscience of it, it mattered not. And so here's what my mother did. God bless my mother. She's a different sort.
Yeah.
That picture was in my grandma's house, and she was fussing about it. Oh, we got to do something about it. Mom said, I know what I'll do. I'll go out here to the store and got some paint markers that would match. And so she goes in here and she marks all that stuff out. Okay. So the skulls are still there. They're just covered up by paint.
Right.
But it cleared that conscience for Grandma. And my mom never did have that conscience. She's like, well, whoop-de-doo. So what?
Yeah.
There's skulls there. It don't mean nothing to me. I still see that beautiful picture that was intended for me to see. I'm not focusing on those skulls or anything. Right. And so a lot of times,
and that's a good analogy.
That's how we.
Yes.
That's how we
live our life.
Yeah. It's how we perceive.
Right. Well, and Paul said, he said, I'm convinced that there's nothing that's unclean within itself, right. but to him that esteemeth it to be unclean. Right. Now, that's where it's at. Yeah. You know, of course, then you raised the question of, well, you know, so I can, you know, fornicate and do all this. But, you know, now, and again, and I'm going to revert back to another one of those things that just proves that there is a creator. And that is that in that spot, there is a acknowledgement, whether I'm willing to admit it or whether I'm not, that what I'm about to do is wrong. Yeah. And a good example of that is with a child. And you know, again, having grandchildren, you've got kids, you watch close enough, and you'll see when they're about to do something, mm-hmm. and want to peep over their head and mm-hmm. see. Now, if they get caught and you go to approach them, oh, I didn't know.
That's direct admission that I knew what I'm about to do is wrong.
Yes, yeah. And we're that way. Mm-hmm. And you know, whether we want to admit it or not, there is an acknowledgement, even with the most warped conscience. There is an acknowledgement to know that I'm stepping out of bounds, and to prove that, you know. Why don't we just go out here and take a gun, and the first individual that disagrees with me or I don't like, just pull the gun out and shoot them.
Right.
It's because we know there's something in us. We know that's not the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. Now, there's some people that overstep that bound and do that, mm-hmm. but and for the sake of, just like this deal with Charlie Kirk, mm-hmm. If that dude didn't have an acknowledgement of what he was about to do being wrong, why didn't he just step out in the middle of that crowd? And
sure.
Why did he hide?
Absolutely.
Because he knew what he was about to do. So whether I lie to myself or to everybody and say, oh, well, no, I didn't realize that was wrong. I don't feel that that's wrong. Mm-hmm. Sure you do. Yeah. It's just...
But, there is that person out there that does have a debased mind, or that reprobate mind that we talk about. Right. Now, today, we would call that a sociopath.
Right.
That's a person that's devoid of any conscience.
Right.
And I think we saw that with Hitler and the SS.
For sure.
And
right.
Those of that ilk. But there's people now that serial killers, and they have no conscience at all. And if you listen to an interview of some of them, you just be amazed at how there's just no remorse.
So void of emotion.
Yeah, there's no remorse. There's no emotion there. That is a person who is a reprobate. Right. That's a person who is devoid of any conscience of something greater than themselves.
Right.
It's just my needs. And that's truly all I care about, is my needs. I needed something from that little girl, and so when I was done, I killed her.
Right.
And that satisfied my need, therefore it's right.
Right. And the amazing thing about that is if you go into the first chapter of the book of Romans, you'll actually find Paul wrote the process.
That's exactly
to
right.
which one would end up in that mind. Mm-hmm. Is that something, and maybe I'm just leading into because I believe, but is that not something that should paint a picture to us and let us know that maybe before it was so predominant that we had these people with these minds? And I know, you go back into ancient Bible days and even like the 70 AD with what was it, Constantine and Nero and some of those. I know there were warped minds and all that.
Sure, yeah.
But not near as predominant as they are today. Mm-hmm. So with this being written, does that not paint us a picture that God was trying to let us know if we don't monitor, just like you were talking a minute ago, some of these warnings and some of this stuff that we've gotten through the Bible as far as false prophets and deceivers and all that, can we not see that God actually painted a pattern out for us and told us, if you're not careful and you start following these steps, this is where it's going to end?
Well, the first thing you got to realize when he's talking about that, where did this start? Let's talk about pagan, little pagan tribes in, New Guinea or somewhere.
Right.
Okay. You say, well, them poor people never really had a chance. They don't know anything.
Right.
But wait a minute. Their descendants all came from 3 that got off the boat.
Absolutely.
Off the ark. So what I'm saying is all 3 families that got off that boat, Shem, Ham, Japheth,
right,
they all knew the truth. They all knew the truth. They all understood the truth. And somewhere along the line, down through generations,
that truth lost its importance.
It was lost. And so, can you really say he's not going to hold him accountable for that? Of course he is.
For sure.
Right. And it's the same thing in our life. If we replace truth with anything but truth,
right,
we're going the wrong way, and we're going to pay the price. And I dare say even our ancestor, our offspring, and those that will come on later. I rode I rode off my grandparents and my parents teaching me the right way. I understood that from a very early age, but it's only because they taught me that. Right. And they passed that right down through the generations. Now it's my job to pass that on to my children, and it will be their job to pass it on. But if it gets lost, it's somebody's going to be accountable.
And it's not on God. And then that was my next question. So what if what you were taught, if you decide to fold it up, stick it in the closet?
And we see that happen.
And it happens. Mm-hmm. So is it God's fault?
No.
No, it's not.
So when society devolves, we can't blame God, can we?
You can't blame God because it all started It's like you said, the same three. And then, you jump pre-flood, and it all started with the same two, Adam and Eve.
Right.
So, and again, and I think it just goes right back to, we continually ask the wrong questions. And we continually put the blame in the wrong spot. Because, if you with your children, if you give them every opportunity to succeed in life, and they swindle all that away, how is it your fault if they end up, no disrespect to anybody that's homeless or anything like that, but how is it your fault if they end up homeless? I mean, when you've given them everything that you could possibly give them to be a success in life, but they reject it, it's not your fault.
Absolutely
it's
not.
Their fault.
Absolutely.
So if God's given us everything, and I choose, and that's something that I think every living individual needs to actually put a little thought into. If you fold up that gospel and you throw that in the closet, then 15 years or 20 years down the road, when your children, have such a warped perception of society, or they get hooked on drugs, or maybe they end up on the streets, and then all of a sudden you decide, well, let me back up and fix this. Well, it's kind of hard to stuff them words back into your mouth. Just the same as it's kind of hard to go back. So right now, when that passes by, and you actually have that opportunity to choose life or death, or to believe or to not believe, we need to keep in mind, my choices are not just going to affect me, but they're going to affect a lot of people around me.
Right.
Very
much.
And the Bible even said, we're without excuse.
We are without excuse. That's what he said.
Yeah. I mean, we are.
Talking about, we hit on it way earlier about the remnant. And this is one thing that I believe separates Christianity from all other religions. God has made sure all down through the course of history that there is a true remnant, a true seed of faith, those who are of faith. And if we look at, let's say, the Greek gods, we look at it today as mythology.
Yeah.
Okay? And so we read about it in schools, and we read about it as, just mythological things. But in that day, they truly believed that.
Sure.
But nobody today really believes in Zeus, or, I mean, I'm not going to say there's not some
as a whole
nut job out there that don't believe that, but by and whole, nobody believes in those gods anymore.
Right.
So where's their remnant? There is none. So God has made a way all the way from the beginning of time, and he'll take it all the way to the end. There'll be a remnant somewhere. And if we look at it, we go back to the Catholic Church. We go back to Martin Luther. Before his conversion, Martin Luther, he tells about how miserable he really was. Right. Because he knew something was wrong. He understood that something was wrong, and that tells me that there was something in his heart that was different than the establishment. Okay? Right. And so he's searching for truth. And so he runs across that passage, I believe it's in Romans, that says, the just shall live by faith. And when that dawned on him, what that really meant, he said it was like rivers just flooding his mind, and his mind opened up and began to understand that what he'd been taught was wrong.
Right. Yeah.
And so that gave birth to that Protestant movement that we're a part of today.
Yeah.
But that was that remnant that God God opened his mind up to see that, so that that remnant wouldn't die out.
Yeah. Well, and I hope that that's something that not to compare ourselves with anybody, but I hope that in our own way we can pass that on as well.
I believe we can, and I want to throw this in here because I believe we share one thing in common. All we're interested in is truth.
That's it.
I may not have it right all the time, but I can promise you this. All I care about is truth. I love what Grandpa taught me, but I got to realize that maybe Grandpa wasn't right about everything.
Not right. Not to say Grandpa was a bad person.
No, but it's up, and it's incumbent upon me to read this word and rightly divide it as best I can.
Right.
And I think that's one thing that we have in common, and I think that separates us, not bragging on us,
right,
but it separates us from a lot of folks you're going to see on YouTube, on Facebook, and all that. A lot of these folks, they're pushing an agenda.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in that. If it's not scriptural, I don't really care about it.
Well, and you know, the end of the day, you know, and we started out and kind of went over this. It's not near as important to me, and I think I can speak on behalf of, because what most people don't know is, you know, for a year or so, several times a week, we've actually right outside this door and had about every conversation that's possible scripturally based.
Some of the most mind-opening conversations I've had in my life was right here with you.
Yes. So from that spot, you know, being right and being wrong is irrelevant. I mean, you know, and again, and I say I don't feel like the need to be right is that big an issue, because, you know, I guess maybe I've been wrong enough. But being right is not near as important as it is that I leave something behind.
Yeah.
That not just my grandchildren or your grandchildren, but anybody that would take the time to listen to this, that their grandchildren and great-grandchildren would have a little something, if it's nothing more than just to question enough to try to find truth.
Amen.
And if that can happen, whether I'm right, whether I'm wrong, whether you're right, that's irrelevant. But what is important is that I can give something to the generation behind me that hopefully they'll see a value in and pass it on down.
Right.
So that remnant actually will continue to go. And that's the main thing with this.
Yeah, the Bible mentions so many times the true remnant.
The true remnant.
The remnant, the true seed of Abraham are those who were of the faith that believe the promises of God, whether it be Old Testament, New Testament.
Yeah.
Elijah. That's what it takes to be the remnant.
Right. Yeah, you know, and God told Elisha, when they were in that cave, he said, "Get out."
Yeah.
He said, "I've reserved unto myself
7,000.
7,000.
Yeah.
It's not bowed the knee."
Yeah.
And you're right.
And he thought he was all alone.
And he thought he was all alone.
Yeah.
I mean, he even said, I and I alone.
Yeah.
And God said, "Get up."
Yeah.
Well, and you'll find the same thing with Paul, just like what you were saying. You know, Paul said that, you know, he said, God has reserved a remnant of this people. And that remnant is still going today. You know, it's really easy to throw everybody in the basket with church, simply because, you know, then you've got, you know, a lot of these prosperity preachers, and I guess that's what bothers me the most with them, is they've actually got the potential and the opportunity. They've reached thousands and thousands of people, and could do so much good, but rather they take that opportunity for their own personal gain. And not only, you know, is it wrong in their self to do that, but it also makes me, you, and every other believer that really is not in it for myself, but in it to try to pass that remnant on. It makes us all look like we're in the same basket. But I can assure you that, you know, those individuals look just as black and dark to me as they do to some of those out there that's had bad experiences with. Because, you know, anybody that tells me that I need a 30,000 square foot house for me and my wife, I mean, come on.
So when you invite an unbeliever to church, and the first thing they come up with is, well, I don't like what I've seen in churches. All I can look to them and say is, I don't either.
I agree. 100%. I agree.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm not here to defend that.
No.
But there is a gospel.
Right.
There is a gospel in there somewhere.
Right.
And that's where we need to all be.
Yeah. Well, and you know, even if you look back through the Bible times, I mean, what we would call the modern day church people was the very ones that caused the Lord all his trouble.
Exactly right.
I mean, they were the very ones. It was the religious crowd.
And you know, one thing that's interesting about that right there, well, there's a lot of things interesting, but one thing that's truly interesting about that is those who should be the closest to God are the ones who are the farthest away.
Right. And the ones that could do the most good. I mean, you know, you look
These men understood the precepts of God. They understood, you know, the Old Testament so well.
The Sanhedrin court.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and we know from Paul.
They could quote Moses word for word.
Absolutely. I mean, Paul, from a young teenager, was you know, sculpted to be on that Sanhedrin court. Look at how much good with the knowledge that they had that they could do.
Yeah.
but they chose rather, just like the modern day,
the thing about that right there is the hardest person to convince that they're wrong is one that's living pretty close. And I'll say that for me, because
Sure.
I can say this. I'm not bragging on me, but I was never like a lot of people. I was never crooked in business dealings. I tried to be straight up
Right.
in business dealings. I tried not to lie. I can't say that I didn't occasionally tell something wasn't true.
Right.
But, as a general rule, when I was out sin, I still, I had a standard in my life, and I
Right.
tried to teach my kids right from wrong at that point. And the hardest thing in the world is when you see Christians stepping outside and doing something wrong, and you see how wrong it is.
Yeah.
The easiest thing in the world for you to do as that non-believer is say, well, I'm living as good as they are.
Yeah.
I'm living every bit as good as they are. If they're going to make it, I'll make it in on a roller skate.
I heard my dad say that 100 million times.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that is the hardest person. Now, if you take a person that's, just, totally depraved, it's not hard for him to see he's wrong.
Right.
When the gospel is shed on him, it's not hard for him to recognize that need.
Right.
But a person that's living pretty close, that's the hardest person in the world.
Right.
And
Sure.
you see, and I believe that's a lot, we might even make that analogy with the Pharisees. I mean, they understood God, they understood his precepts and stuff. They just wouldn't accept Christ.
Right.
They would not accept that. They were so stubborn.
Yeah. And you covered that a while ago. It was because all of them were looking for this natural king that was going to come in this great palace that was actually going to
They
deliver
believed in
them.
the prophecy of the Messiah.
Well, sure.
They just didn't believe that was it.
Because they were looking for somebody that would deliver them
They're
from.
still looking for that Messiah.
They're still
today.
looking. They wanted somebody or thought their king was going to deliver them from the bondage
Absolutely.
of Rome. But can we not see that the gospel was telling us maybe there's a greater bondage than just being under bondage to
Right.
Rome?
I think John the Baptist actually had an issue with that right there.
Well,
there he is in jail, and he's understanding that he's supposed to be part of the king's entourage. I'm supposed to be doing pretty well right now.
Forerunner. Right.
But here I am dying in this prison, likely going to lose my life.
And he sent his disciples.
Sent his disciples out and said, hey, do we look for another one?
The same one that leaped in Elizabeth's womb when Mary spoke of the Messiah. The same one that was down there in Jordan baptizing, and he looked and said, behold, the Lamb of God. And then turns around and sends his disciples to him, and he says, are you he, or do we look for another?
Yeah.
And the first response Jesus gives, he says, blessed is he that's not offended in me.
Right.
So he was trying to get John to understand. John, you're just not seeing it.
Yeah.
But
we got to understand how. I mean, we can look back on it now.
Absolutely.
And we understand it pretty well. But if you were those
John
guys
didn't
in
have the four gospels to read.
He didn't.
No,
He didn't have that hindsight.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and don't you think that's why that Jesus looked and he said, among men, he said, there's not any greater than old John.
Right.
I mean, I think he was letting him know, yes, you need to let John know that it's not good to be offended in me, but at the same time, I'm going to let you all know this man is above all.
That's right.
But then he says, but even the least in the kingdom. So he was saying, when this veil gets pulled off, and it's actually revealed what's going on when this gospel's here, even John, he's not going to be as good as that. Because he wasn't saying John was better or worse. He was just saying there's going to be an understanding that's going to come that's going to cause him to see way past where John can see, just like what you were saying now. Well, and I used to hear my dad, to go back to what you were talking about there a minute ago about looking and well, if they're going, I'm going. And I used to always think, even as a young boy, I used to always think about that. And I would think, well, that's kind of foolish. Because if they're really wrong, it's like my dad was saying, well, if they're going to mash their finger, I'm just going to draw back and take a hammer and mash my finger because they're doing it, and that mindset just never made sense to me. But then I see, I guess the driver behind that. And that was a way for him to point the finger and soothe his own conscience.
Right.
So, and again, I think that's, with what we've talked, I think that's why it's so important as the church to do everything we can to not give that opportunity.
Well, and speaking to that, we're all predisposed to that. Point that finger.
Sure.
I mean, like we talked about earlier, it goes right back to the garden. It started there. So why would we think we're going to be any different?
Absolutely.
But fortunately, there's been a few pillars in my life that I actually looked
right. Yeah.
for
and
the flaws.
Right.
And I was actually making a conscious effort
yes.
to try to see the flaw, because I knew it had to be there.
Has to be there.
But you know what? There was a few pillars in my life that I knew.
Just unshakable.
The unshakable.
Yeah.
This person was going to live the rest of his life out like this. And
that's what
that's
happens.
Such a lie.
Yes. And that's
that
what
lets
happens.
you know that it is possible to live that kind of life.
And when you're really seeking truth, I really think that's where God places you, is in that spot.
Now, when a person, I worked for a person that run a gas station, and he sold tires there, and he sold cars. That's where that Camaro was I wanted. I worked for that person for years, and that person, when a person does that much business, and not a person could come in there and say nothing bad about him, that man's done something right. Yeah. If you can sell cars, for God's sake, used cars.
Yeah. And I know the man you're talking about.
Yeah. And if you can sell used cars and not get that reputation of being a crook or being underhanded, hey, man.
Yeah, because you just, the way life goes itself teaches you that at some point you're going to get that bad one.
You've done something.
Yeah, and if you want to keep the business afloat, you have to kind of fudge the truth. So
Yeah.
And I know the man that you're talking about, and absolutely.
And he's not the only one. There's been other pillars, but that's just one that often comes to my mind when I see certain.
Well, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because that was always one of the ones that my dad would always look to when he was looking for that foundation. That was one of them that he would always mention.
Well, and the thing about it is, that's been many years ago, but that light is still shining. What year did your dad die?
96, I believe, 97.
It's soon to be 2026. That light shone then, and that light is still shining, because we still talk about that today.
Yeah, it would have been 96. I want to say February the 26th of 96.
It's my desire, truly, in my heart, it's my true desire to be that man.
Yes,
that people still talk about half a century later.
Yeah. Well, don't you think when one of the prophets prophesied in the Old Testament about leaving an inheritance for your children's children, that's what they were talking about.
Yeah,
leave
exactly
them
what
something. Leave them something. If it's talking about the money, I mean, we've done discussed that. I mean, man, that money, and the way things are going now, I mean, if our debt keeps going the way it's going, I mean, you could be worth $100 billion and not be able to buy a can of pop. So there's no foundation in that.
Right.
So that's what he was saying. He was saying, leave something for the generations past you that they don't get fixated on that money or those tangible things that's so uncertain.
Yeah.
Because in that spot, if I find who I am and I find my identity, for lack of a better way of saying it, in a dollar bill, what would happen if, and of course, I think maybe the last time I heard was the $37 trillion we are in debt. At some point, this debt is going to rise, and the value of our dollar is going to go.
Well, sure. I mean, when you're talking trillions, what's it matter if it's 30 or 300?
Right.
I can't fathom that number either way.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking
it might
about.
as well be 300.
Yeah, lots and lots.
Yeah.
So that's just enough to say that, if that's where I get my identity, man, I'm building on an awful shaky foundation. Yes.
Yeah.
So, and it's that way with everything in life. I mean, outside of truth, everything in life is just that unstable. And you got to be real careful. There's even ministries that, find our identity in a ministry, and then all of a sudden the people that I'm ministering to decides, well, they don't think I'm, the jive up to date and hip or whatever, so well, let's get us a new one in. Well, if that's where I find it, So anything outside of truth, let's build on that foundation, because that's where I can leave that generational wealth.
That's right.
Just like what you said, luckily for us, we were fortunate enough to have those people in our life. So, why be selfish? Why not just pass that on and give that truth to another, whether it be my kids, your kids, our grandkids, or somebody else's. Let's try to get it out there and give them the opportunity to have something solid and firm that they can stand on, so that when life happens, it don't just destroy it.
Right.
Because it's happening to enough people now.
Yeah, I saw a real sad story. It was a documentary that I was watching. There was this preacher that he was Canadian, and he started out about the same time that Billy Graham started. And he started his ministry then. I can't think of his name right now. But anyway, he wanted more than anything at a young age to become a minister.
Right.
So he went and studied the gospel and became a minister. And he would go to these youth rallies and preach at these youth rallies. And he was very successful. He and Billy Graham had a very good ministry early on. I mean,
right.
Preaching to like 25,000 kids, a lot of opportunity there, and he tells his own story, and he, it just makes you want to cry listening to his story, because you just feel so sad for him, that he wasn't building on the right foundation. But let me get through this real quick. He he began to have doubts. Doubt crept into his mind about what he was preaching, and it's these age-old questions that we've already covered here. Why do bad things happen to good people?
Yeah,
how do we cross those hurdles? How do we, in our mind, make sense of that?
Those are hard questions.
They are. Yeah. They are. But, the answers are here.
Sure.
If we truly give ourselves to the gospel. But those doubts just kept creeping in. And over time, it just became unbearable. And eventually, he had to quit the ministry. And he became an atheist. And as far as I know, he died as an atheist. He wrote a few books, very well-spoken man. He said, Why I Left God. That was one of his books, Why I Left God. Wow. And, I think how sad that is to live that way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
After knowing the gospel.
Look at Judas.
Yeah.
And that's another good example of it being right there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to, and I know we live in a time, and we can get to debating and discussing the thousands and thousands of doctrines and opinions going around, and none of that matters. But that's why that I feel like it's so important that we get locked in on truth right up front.
Yes.
Because I, from my understanding of the scripture, there is actually a place that I can get to where I can actually be a Christian and actually fall away from that, and that candlestick or that spirit be withdrawn from me.
Absolutely.
That's a very, very sad place to think that, I was that close to truth, but allowed a diversion from the adversary to come in and cause me. And I think that's why it's so important that we ask the right questions.
Right.
Because, you start asking the wrong questions, and you're going to start getting answers from the wrong source.
Right.
So, very, very important that, we allow our mind to be transformed. And rather than looking through the eyes of what benefits me, let's look through the eyes of what benefits others.
Right. And one thing about that story I just told that kind of stood out to me is he desired to be a minister from the very early age.
Right.
Well, now, most ministers, most preachers, they're called. And a lot of them, they actually resist that calling for a while.
Right.
And so I kind of worry about a person that says, well, that's just what I wanted to be. And, that tells me that maybe that foundation was never really there.
In a sincere spot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah. And from the experience that I've had, yeah, most preachers that I talk to, or that I know, that we know, will tell you that was something that they had such a fear for.
Yeah.
That they ran from that because they knew, the responsibility that comes with
and once
that.
you become a Christian, you start understanding how
serious.
This is serious.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
You don't pick this book up and start speaking out of this book unless you are firm.
Absolutely.
And that's a scary thing. And I agree with you. I think that's why a lot of preachers we hear today talk about how they resisted that ministry for a period of time.
Yeah.
Some of them for years.
Right. Well, and I guess that's one of the things that bothers me with like the prosperity gospel and a lot of these other movements that we see, that's outside of truth. And I've told the church this, there's more at stake than just you and me. I mean, if God allows time to go on, I mean, you're going to have grandchildren. I already have grandchildren. And, if nothing else, my grandchildren and your grandchildren and somebody else's grandchildren, they could get a hold of some of that stuff.
Yeah.
And it could lead them down a wrong path. And God forbid that I paint a bad picture for your grandchildren.
Or so important.
Absolutely. I mean,
important.
And I think that's why that call with preaching or even, even with something like this, and all day long, I pray, God, give me the heart your son had, that is not out to destroy, but that's out to build up. Because, this is something that, if it's presented in the wrong manner, I mean, look at how many lives have been destroyed through false teaching and false doctrines and all that.
How many times did Paul and the other apostles warn us of that?
It's in every book.
It's in every one of them.
Every one of them. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's why, because they foresaw that not only would you be affected, but, now you've got children, and then if they have children, those affect. That's why that it started out with 3 that got off the boat. And now look where we're at. I mean, I think the last time that I looked in studying for Sunday school at church, there was somewhere around, 28, 48, something, just Baptist denominations, and 20-some, Pentecostal denominations.
Right.
Somebody's had too big a need to be right.
Well, how many times did we see Paul talking about leaven? And he's always depicting leaven or yeast as sin. And he says a little bit, just a little bit is all it takes to destroy the whole batch.
Absolutely.
Or to change the whole batch.
It does. It does. I mean, well, for a cook, I mean, you put just a little bit of it in there, but that bread, and it'll cause it to rise.
Well, the first we see of leaven is when the Israelites are being led out of Egypt. And that last plague had came. God had taken the firstborn, except for those who had the blood from the lintel and the doorpost. When the death angel came, he passed over.
Right.
That's where we get Passover.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
So, in the middle of the night, Pharaoh wakes up and sees what all's happened. At this time, he's so distraught, he says, Moses, you and Aaron, get your people out of here.
Right.
Y'all are a plague to me. Get out of here.
Yeah.
And so the children of Israel got their stuff together so quickly that they didn't have time to worry about their leaven. So how symbolic is this? They left their leaven back in Egypt. And that's why we constantly see Paul referring to leaven as sin.
Right.
It's
they left the
it's amazing how all this connects together.
Sure, absolutely.
And every New Testament truth is based somewhere in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
There's a parallel somewhere.
Yeah, and Paul said it was a shadow. And it is. And there's so many I guess shadows through the Old Testament and the New, that paints these pictures.
Yeah.
And and the Levin's one. And I think about like David with the miry clay. And of course, the children of Israel, they were in bondage. They actually used clay to make bricks. That's
Right.
what they were doing.
Yeah.
So again, it's just another picture of that bondage in Egypt.
Oh yeah, and there's so many analogies.
Oh,
in there.
absolutely.
If you go to the red heifer, I believe in Numbers chapter 13, I think. If you go and read about that red heifer and it's just so many parallels to Jesus Christ, who would later come.
Yeah.
And
it can't all be a coincidence.
No, it cannot.
It cannot all be a
And the more you dig into this thing, the more you realize how true and how real it is because of stuff like that. Yeah. There's no way a human being,
no way,
could come up with something out of his mind like this. Yeah. There is no way, because this book takes away power from the human being.
Right.
If any man had wrote this, there would be something in here that would make him
a contradiction.
That would bring him up, that would make him great, that would make him rise above everything. Yeah. That's not,
it's not that.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and there's a video going around right now on the internet, and the guy's talking about some of this, and over 1,500 years, 40 some authors, 35, 40 authors, 3, 4 continents.
All saying the same thing.
All saying the same thing. So,
what's the chances of that?
Right, sure. I mean, you think about, 270, 280 years ago, this was not a country.
Yeah.
We were still, at some of us in different parts, but we were still across seas. So now you start thinking about all these spots. And we sail to America, and all these people come together, and they've actually written a perfectly harmonized book. And that's a couple hundred years ago. Think about 1,500 years. And I know it's common, among the atheists. Well, you're foolish to believe that. Well, how foolish would you have to be to think that all this is just a coincidence?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
To me, that's where I think.
Oh yeah. The scripture proves itself time and time again.
And time again.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, hopefully at some point through this, if whoever would watch would bear with us, we can get into a lot of this and maybe make a lot more of it, a little easier to understand.
Yeah.
Because I know, and it's nothing negative to anybody, but not everybody was fortunate enough to be raised in families similar to us. And it's an unfortunate truth. There's some people out there that's never, ever even had the gospel presented to them in the right manner.
As the gospel.
As the gospel, yes.
Yeah.
I know there's people out there that's had it, beat and shoved, but we know that's not the gospel.
Right.
So hopefully at some point we can give it in a manner that it will become as appealing as I feel like it is to us.
Right. Well, I think we can do that, and I know I've enjoyed my time here tonight with you. I've always enjoyed conversation with you.
Yeah.
I've never had a conversation that I went, man, that was boring.
well, and that goes two ways. And even more important than that, I think that we've had our own little sessions that I think we both agree we both enjoyed.
Yeah.
But even more than that, I hope that this goes out to somebody out there that they would see that same thing, and that there would be something in it that would draw them to come back, and they would start to see this. Because, again, this will never be presented as a right or a wrong position, or as something to beat you down, because God will never come to any individual in a manner that it's a force.
Right.
And hopefully we can present that in a manner that people would see Him the way that we see Him, and I can assure anybody, if the world could see Him through my eyes, the world would love Him.
Right.
Because I certainly love Him.
Amen. Me too, buddy. And I love this gospel, and I love talking about it. And I can sit here all night and do this, and we have a time or two.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, we appreciate everybody being here with us tonight, and come back next time, and Let's get in here and mine this gospel out together.
Absolutely.
Good
and
night.
The best way is a like and subscribe and all the buttons that comes along with all
Yeah,
this.
whatever. Hey,
That gets us out there.
We're too old to know anything about technology.
Absolutely.
So if you see a button, push it.
Absolutely.
Unless it's delete. Don't do that. All
right. And remember, this is always about lifting us up and getting us to see him for who he really is.
Amen.
It's never about us.
Right.
It's about him and who he is.
Amen.
And thank you for watching.
All right. Good night.